going to sound like I'm picking on this guy. It's not true at all. Is the coach, in this case, costing football's best player the Heisman Trophy? Not on purpose, just the amount of noise might be mucking things up a little bit. I'm going to say maybe. I'll leave it up to you. You can have an opinion on that. The Heisman Trophy is one of the most, if not the most, iconic awards in sports. I don't know what other arguments you want to make, but there's very few that are as well known as the name Heisman Trophy. Everybody knows the Heisman Trophy is about college football. And if you ask 1,000 people, they'd say the award, the Heisman Trophy, goes to the best player in the sport. That's what everyone would say. I know it's a generic term, but that's what most people would say. My point is that it's not a throwaway. It is one of the most significant awards in all of sports. So why is the very best player in the game? By a pretty large margin, I would say. The most dominating player, the most electric player in the sport, not even polling among the top 12, but the backup quarterback at Texas, who's played 3 quarters, 3.5 maybe, and that's against Colorado State and UTSA. The backup quarterback at Texas is among the top 5 or 6. And by Monday, I'm telling you, the backup quarterback at Texas will quite possibly be among the top 3. In fact, I'm wondering if the backup quarterback at Texas, for now, Arch Manning, might just be, I don't think this is, I'm not being that sarcastic. Arch Manning might be the first backup quarterback ever invited to the Heisman Trophy celebration ceremony in New York. Here's the stat line of the most dynamic and by far the best player in college football. He might be the most dynamic player of the last 20 years, and I don't think he's got any chance to win. The backup quarterback at Texas right now, if you had to make a bet, might win before this guy. Let's see. Last week, in a win over Colorado State, he played 123 of 135 plays in a game. If you're just trying to add it all up, he plays about 96% of all the snaps in a game. And he's doing this oftentimes at altitude. So he plays 123 of 135 total plays. He catches 13 passes for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. And oh, by the way, an interception, 5 tackles, and a pass breakup in one game. That's like a stat line for 5 or 6 players. And you know what? He does it every week. And then I said, this is the best player in the game by a large margin. I mean, if you ever want to break down, it's a quarterback award, blah, blah, blah. We know what it is. But if you're really going to have a generic term, what's the best football player in the game? There's nobody even close. I don't even think we have to do any sort of two-way player debate. We might end up in the 40s or 50s. That's his stat line for one game last week. Let's see. By the way, he had 10 catches in a loss against Nebraska. They're not terrible. That's a pretty good night. He has 30 catches for 342 yards and 5 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. His name is Travis Hunter. He plays for Colorado, and apparently he has no chance to win the Heisman Trophy. And I don't know how. I really don't. I'm waiting for someone to explain how that stat line, I don't care what his name is, and I don't care where he plays, as long as it's Division I, tell me how that stat line keeps anybody from winning the Heisman Trophy. It's absurd. But to think, put it in comparison, to think there's guys that are going to have, nobody's going to have a stat line like this guy. No one. It can't exist unless it's Division II. Guys don't even play this much in high school anymore. And even if you did, you'd be off the charts great in high school if you put up that kind of stat line. So he's probably not even going to be in New York. He's probably not going to be among the top 10 or 12. And 1 or 2 quarterbacks from Texas might just be there. The quarterback from Georgia will just be there. And then throw in other famous programs, and this guy will not. To prove, there's another level to this, and this is what For some reason, I've told you, Deion Sanders is the Donald Trump of sports. If you're in the talk space, you mention Donald Trump and people's hair catches on fire one way or another. They don't even hear what you say after you just mentioned the name. They just either want to go, yeah, he's a jackass, or I hate your guts. That's it. It's just like a button. It's Pavlov's dog. Deion Sanders is, I found, kind of the same thing. People just don't even, you either want to hate him desperately, and you're not going to hear another word that I say, or you're convinced that whatever I say is going to be some awful hot take about him. That usually the feedback I get is people assume that it's racially motivated, which is BS and insensitive, and it's not fair. But that's my take. So I'm going to mention Deion Sanders, and I'm letting you know that half the audience is already flipping out. To prove that the only thing that matters at Colorado is Deion Sanders. The noise of Deion Sanders, the very being of Deion Sanders, I think you could argue, sucks up the oxygen, the publicity oxygen. And so people don't know nor pay attention to this guy. I know it's not, I don't think it's intentional at all. I don't. I mean, I think it's really cool that Deion Sanders lets the guy play both ways. I think it's great. I think it's made this guy the most valuable player going into the NFL draft next year. I think it's a cool story. As long as he doesn't get hurt, it's a really cool story. I can't say one negative thing about the way Deion Sanders has handled the best player in football, maybe the best player in football of the past 10, 15, 20 years, maybe longer than that. It's just remarkable what this guy does. He'll catch 13 passes and go break up another 5 passes. They ought to let him run back kicks, too, just for fun. So I'm not implying, those of you that are triggered easily by the name Deion Sanders, I'm not implying his coaches intentionally, keep him out of the spotlight. The fact is, the only thing that seems to matter to people about Colorado is Deion Sanders. The only news conference that matters to anyone is Deion Sanders. So he sucked up the oxygen, and nobody even knows what this kid is doing. I mean, that is a ridiculous night. It's a ridiculous night at work. To catch 13 passes, multiple touchdowns, have an interception, and 5 pass breakups is absurd. And only had 5 tackles. That's just crazy. He won't get it. I don't even think he'll be there unless they get on some kind of hot streak. I mean, they'd have to get on a hot streak, and I don't see that happening because they can't block and tackle. But the only thing keeping him from not being a bigger story is, one, they're not a football factory by far. It's not a blue blood program. Now you know what I mean by blue blood programs. When a backup quarterback at Texas is in the running for the Heisman Trophy and the best player in the game by 150 yards isn't even mentioned anymore. It's just because at Colorado, it's just Deion Sanders. The superstar coach sucking up the oxygen that is taking away the news cycle away from a star player. And I would also add to it, not to blame Arch Manning for this, but there's no one that is sucking up oxygen more than the last name of Manning. And I don't blame him for that. That's my industry. My industry follows stars because you like stars, because we're a TikTok culture with an attention span of TikTok. So whoever's a star of the moment is going to get that oxygen. It's amazing that the best player with the most ridiculous stat line and the most ridiculous skills and stamina is not even, he's an afterthought. He won't win, pretty sure. He probably won't even get invited. And at the end of the year, if I did this every single week, if I just read his stat line of 13 catches, 350 yards, by the way, so he doesn't just catch screen passes. He actually averages almost 12 yards a reception. And everyone in the stadium, everyone in the entire United States knows he's going to get the ball, and he still gets open. Everybody on the planet knows you can't throw the ball his way because he's the best defensive back in the game by far. And he still has multiple interceptions and pass breakups in one game. It's crazy to play that many snaps. It's off the charts impressive to be that good on that many snaps and not slow down. Is it because his head coach is the most famous person in the room? I think so. Yeah. I'm not going to say it's more that than it is they're just not a blue blood program and they don't matter much anymore. But I think it's part of it. I do. But fully appreciate how great this guy is. I mean, if you follow the sport at all and you care about great talent, this is one of the rare talents to come along. And you don't have to know his name. It's Travis Hunter, by the way. But the stat line is enough. That stat line alone means you call out his name and give him a trophy. Maybe multiple trophies. You could win the defensive back award, too.